Thanks, everyone. And before we get started, I want to just thank the entire LSI team and Scott for putting together this incredible conference. You know, we've been sponsoring for 4 years now, since the inception. And he was telling me last night the attendance is up 50% over last year, and it grew substantially from the year before. So really terrific to see so many good people in our industry here. So thank you. So to get started, they made it real simple for me. Everyone's picture is above them. So I don't have to do introductions, but maybe a good way to start is if Amanda will start on that end, and would just like to hear a little bit about why you're here, what you're interested in with respect to Fujifilm Sonosite, and whatever you would like to talk about. Thank you.
Okay, good. Hi, my name is Amanda DePalma. I am the Vice President of Marketing at Fujifilm Sonosite. In my role, I'm responsible for strategy, business development, product management, and downstream marketing. Fujifilm, a lot of people don't know that we are in healthcare. Our healthcare business is about $7 billion annually, and we go across contract drug manufacturing, drug development, and then medical systems, which includes imaging and the ultrasound group that I'm part of. It's great to be here and see so many people here this year. It has grown exponentially over last year. And I'm looking forward to listening and learning from the panels, and have a number of meetings set up this week to just learn about some of the technologies that are out there that align with our areas of focus in the business.
And if you don't mind, are you interested in any particular markets or categories here today?
Specific categories? So largely within the imaging, so ultrasound technology, along with we've got business in endoscopy and medical informatics.
Finn?
So hi everyone, my name is Finn Haley. I actually am that guy, even though that picture is about 10 years old. I'm the SVP of Corporate Development at Edwards Lifesciences. We are a very focused medical device company that targets structural heart disease and critical care as our primary markets. We are very disciplined around that. So we are not large and broad in our scope, but we're very deep. And then because of that, we pursue breakthrough innovation in that space, and we move very early, and we explore a lot of early stage technologies. So I'm very interested in learning if there are companies in this space. It doesn't matter how early you are in your clinical journey. I say the earlier the better. Let's get to know each other.
Thank you, Dave. Antonio Sanchez-Cordero, Vice President of Strategy and M&A for Thermo Fisher's Specialty Diagnostics portfolio. And I come to this event because it's a great venue for innovation. I'm specifically more focused on our diagnostics platform. So it's great to meet with diagnostic companies that are innovating in their space, and that hopefully start some of those relationships and partnerships for the future.
Yeah, Christos Monovoukas, good to meet everyone here. I run mergers and acquisitions and strategy for Zimmer Biomet. We're a mission-driven company, mostly orthopedics, but we do have a world's first and only smart implant, the smart knee, as it's called, Persona IQ. I'm here to meet and reconnect with old friends and meet new friends. I used to work for Smith & Nephew before, so no stranger to the orthopedics area, but I'm here to learn more about the current innovation in the space.
My name is Ye Bu. I'm a managing director in the strategy and corporate development team at GE Healthcare. I joined GE about 1.5 years ago, and I was an investment banker before that, so recovering banker on that front. So one thing I want to talk about GE Healthcare is that we're a 2-month-old public company, a big startup. Before I joined GE Healthcare, I kind of, although I have been medtech M&A for years, I've worked with Biomet, Zimmer Biomet, and a lot of other companies before. I always thought GE Healthcare is a capital equipment company, kind of brushed it off. Until I came to GE Healthcare, I realized, okay, this is a portfolio, actually a pretty broad portfolio that is a good platform we can use to build on a lot of things. So just, for those who are not familiar with us, we're probably about $19 billion sales on an annual basis. There are 4 segments within GE Healthcare. I'm responsible for the biggest one, which is about half of GE Healthcare revenue, the imaging segment. So within imaging, you can think about the big machines, MI, CT, MR, X-ray, and also image-guided therapy, which is basically the imaging used for intraoperative procedures. And then we have a very strong ultrasound business. And then we also have patient care solutions business, which is more, the ICU, the monitoring, that kind of stuff. And then we also have a pharma diagnostics business, which is more, contrast agent for the imaging. So anything that I look forward to meeting a lot of you. Anything that you feel like you have a connection with one of our business, I welcome the conversation. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. And so, as you can see, we have a great diversity in terms of product areas and interests. And so, wanted to go into the first real question, and that is corporate venture investing part of your strategy? And if so, at what stage does the candidate have to be? Does the company have to be? And then how would that differ from, say, acquisition strategy? Amanda, would you like to take that one?
Sure. So Fujifilm does have a venture arm. Right now that is pretty focused on biotech. We have had some preliminary discussions recently about investing in technologies that are more in the imaging space. As we've had those conversations, I think what we're looking for is around the Series B funding. And the reason for that is we want to have enough proof of concept that the solution, the technology is feasible, but we want to fund that innovation and keep that outside of the larger organization. I think as most of us have seen, oftentimes when innovation comes into a larger organization, it gets squelched. And so we want to help to drive that innovation outside of the organization. It's something, of course, that we would want to have the option to purchase later. But we want to help that innovation move along and then pick that up as it moves further into closer to the commercialization stage.
Finn, would you like to go with that?
Yeah, no, I'd love to comment on that as well. So we also, at Edwards, we also do corporate venture capital. We do that out of our corporate development group. We're very focused on investments that are strategic for the company. So we're much less interested in a financial return. We're more interested in investing in technologies that we could either potentially acquire one day or just that we want to enable. So maybe there's a really interesting technology that helps with patient identification or getting a better diagnosis. We'd like to help those companies succeed as well. There's really no perfect, we'll actually talk to anyone kind of at any stage, to be honest. I think we're a little unique in this way because we're focused on structural heart disease and the technologies that are being developed now are so early stage, you kind of have to get comfortable going super, super early. And oftentimes a company will say, well, we've only done a few patients or we're just in animals. And I'll say, that's great. That's great. When you're in the kind of innovation that we do, you're constantly being humbled all the time. So a lot of the technologies we developed that are now successful had rocky beginnings, and so we totally get that. If you've had an experience that's been a little bit rocky, great. We'd love to talk to you about it. So I say, just come and talk to us. We're really good also at making sure the people that you talk to within Edwards are not the people that are working on our R&D, because a lot of times people will say, we're nervous about that. How do you split that up? We spend a ton of time thinking about that. So don't worry, you're not going to be talking to our R&D teams, you're going to be talking to other people. So let's have a conversation.
Just to follow up to that, Finn, obviously Edwards pioneered the transcatheter heart valve, and I'm curious, you weren't there at the time, I don't believe, only a short period, but do you recall or do you know at what stage that was to do the acquisition?
Yeah, so it was an acquisition. So a lot of people think it was just an internal development. It was actually an acquisition. But without going into the whole story, I will tell you that the development process for that technology, people think it was an overnight success. That wasn't the case at all. And there's a story that's often told about some of these technologies in this space oftentimes would have, in the early experience, they'd go to these conferences and they would do a live case. And in the history of this space of structural heart disease, there have been patients that died in those conferences. And so you would think you have to be really, really comfortable and committed to the fact that if you succeed, you're going to extend people's lives for decades. Because you can get really dissuaded when you experience something like that, right? And so I think people look at this market and think, wow, it just took off and developed. There's been a lot of bumps along the way, and you have to be committed to the evidence, to long regulatory timelines. But if you do, you can make a huge difference. So we're comfortable with all that, but you got to check yourself every so often and make sure you really are. So.
Well, your CEO, Mike Masalan, must have had some guts on that one, huh?
He's an incredible leader.
So, Antonio?
I should have recorded Finn's answer and played back because, like he said, we don't have a corporate venture capital fund, but we do equity investments when it makes sense. And the goal, not that dissimilar, is either we would like to enable that technology, enable that company, and fundraising is one of the pieces of the jigsaw, or we think there's a longer-term opportunity for partnership, and so fundraising is part of that. We also prefer the earlier the better, with the caveat that there's a bit of an inverse relationship in stage of maturity and strategic fit. The earlier it is, the more the strategic fit is relevant to the conversation. But we do, like Finn said, we don't have a CVC fund per se, but we do invest out of the corporate development team.
Yeah, same here with Zimmer Biomet. We made investments before, not at the C stage, but A and B. And so we haven't formalized our investments in a CVC fund. But we're always looking, especially when it comes to data, connecting with our implants, and other interesting technologies.
So we don't have a venture arm now. GE used to have a GE venture. Now we're a standalone public company. We don't really have a venture team dedicated to venture, but we do, as the others talked about, we do minority investment as well, in addition to M&A. For example, we're investing in Centerline Biomedical, which is more on the guidance for navigation guidance for structural heart procedures. And then we also invest in Pulsemore, a point-of-care ultrasound company. And we also invested last year in AliveCore, which is an ECG-based connected care company. So it's case-by-case basis. I would say we probably can get a little bit earlier if it's very close to our core. If it's more, along the disease path, we were probably, more looking. It's probably easier for us once some, regulatory or clinical risk kind of retired. Yep.
The next question we have is, how has the current macroeconomic environment affected your strategy? Amanda, would you like to tackle that one?
This is a
I'm
tough
sorry,
seat.
you're having to go first all the time. We'll change the order.
Well, we had conversations about this panel 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and I don't think any of us could have envisioned the current macroeconomic environment that we're sitting here today. I think what we've seen over the last couple of years has been quite a lot of venture funding and quite a lot of valuations that have been higher than we have been able or willing to participate in. It seems right now that valuations are starting to come down a bit, and it may be a great time for strategics to invest or to acquire. So it seems like things are settling and will probably continue to settle over the next 18 months or so, and it seems like it's a good opportunity for strategics right now. So come talk to us.
Your view on that, Finn?
Yeah, I do have a view. So your question was interesting. You said, how does the environment affect your strategy? I got an unusual answer on this one. It actually doesn't change our strategy that much. And part of it is I've been at Edwards now 3 years, but the strategy is remarkably constant. We're working on breakthrough innovation. That takes time. It takes investment. We're talking years and years out in the future to see value realization. So the strategy doesn't really change every year when we go through it. The core of it is constant. Where I think we are, adapting a little bit is you have to perhaps engage with targets a little bit. If I make it personal to corporate development, we engage with the targets a little differently because their needs change, right? So there's financing needs are a little different than it was very recently. We have companies that we have investments in that now we're banking on having money from certain sources. That's a little bit unclear now. So all that changes, but our strategy doesn't. It really doesn't. Edwards is, I think that's actually something that I think is great about our company, is that we have such a long horizon that we know you kind of keep the core there. And if you're able to develop breakthroughs, extend lives, better quality of life, save costs in the system, we'll be good. That's what we're focused on. That's constant.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense given your very specific focus on structural heart, that the strategy wouldn't change much. How about you, Antonio?
Yeah, I think it doesn't change the strategy. I think it emphasizes a bit sort of the efficiency piece and the growth. And so those are two main levers that, they're always being part of a strategy and our performance, and they're just being emphasized a bit more. Like Amanda said, we are seeing a bit of a change valuation-wise. But to be honest, that doesn't really affect our willingness to transact. I think the biggest challenge we see is the scarcity of assets, particularly in our space in diagnostics, with a scale that plays to our playbook. And I don't think that has changed in the short term or in the last 6 or 12 months. So I don't think it changes too much from the strategy perspective.
I mean, in general, yes, I agree. Strategies, the big picture, the big view, where are you going with the company and all that, that should not change or maybe change a little bit. The tactics definitely changed. Meaning now with this environment, I agree with Amanda and everybody else that it is a buyer's market in a way. I mean, you have the flexibility to select better quality of targets. So we take our time to actually find the perfect fit. So in that respect, tactics have changed for us. The other is, of course, recessionary sort of concerns make us feel more like risk is out there, and maybe we should, modify our search closer to the core versus some near adjacency. So, yeah, overall strategies don't change. We know where we're going. We know we're revenue growth. We look for revenue growth, but the tactics certainly changed.
I tend to agree. I think, when I was a banker, we used to kind of talk with companies more startup rather than, GE, where I'm working now. And we need to say, hey, when people ask you this question, just say you're focused on delivering values to shareholders, which is true, but is in generic form, the business doesn't change. And the strategic fit of a business to us doesn't change because, whatever changed out there. I think, in this kind of environment, ever since pandemic, everybody learned that uncertainty is probably part of the norm going forward. We have to adjust from time to time how we do things. But in the end, our focus is the same. We need to, serve our clients or serve our customers. So that doesn't change. I agree with everybody here.
Next question has to do with when you think about the risks that must be mitigated before you consider a company as an attractive candidate, perhaps for acquisition. What are those risks? Clinical, regulatory, reimbursement? What are the first things that come to mind? And I think for a lot of the young companies out here who are trying to determine, where do I spend my money initially to make sure I overcome some of those risks. So would someone else start? Yeah, why don't we go this way? Give a man a break.
I'll take that. It's really case-by-case basis for us. For example, we did one acquisition, basically the next generation of detector, a company called Prismatic, before I joined the company. So as you can imagine, it's very close to our core. So we actually took on that when it's still in development stage. So a lot of risk didn't retire, but we know that that's our bread and butter. So we are able to get in early. But for others that a little bit down the care pathway, for example, a lot of enabling technologies we're looking at. Our core business is diagnose the scanner, and then you think about, okay, along the care pathway, the navigation, the guidance, the robotics, the further away the implants, the further it is to our core, the more risk we would like it to be retired before it's taken on. But at the end of the day, when we see a company, we focus on the strategic rationale. If we're convinced there's a rationale there, we will figure out the toolkit we need to use to really to make something happen. Yeah.
Similarly, Zimmer Biomet, when we look at an M&A target, we look at what they bring to the table and what Zimmer Biomet brings to the table. And that has to do a lot with the core of the business, but also the capability. So you may be in knees and implants, basically, but you may have great PMA sort of capabilities. So the answer is that the less risk, the better. But if you do bring as a strategic to the table a certain expertise, then you feel more comfortable about one risk or the other. For Zimmer Biomet, the core is implants, attached with data or married with data analytics. Anything else outside that, we do our diligence and try to retire risk as early as possible.
I think for us, none of the risk is a deal breaker. However, like Christos said, the less risk, the better, right? And so when we think about that progressive de-risking, right, starting with technology risk, and then with regulatory risk, and then reimbursement risk, and ultimately commercial traction, right, depending where you are in that path. And I think it's important if you help us understand how you de-risked, how you cleared the risk, right? At times, there's a lot of assumptions on the companies. I think the more you help us sort of check that box, the easier it is to move to the next phase, right? And that translates into evaluation because the risk is less. So.
You know, in our space, again, it's perhaps a little unique in that we're going so early on a lot of these technologies that from a commercial standpoint, I rarely get to buy anything with sales, right? But we do find that we're doing a lot of option deals in this space, right? That's something, and I say a lot, I mean the market participants broadly, us, Medtronic, Boston, others. And those structures are unique in that they oftentimes systematically try to de-risk the development pathway. Clinical is obviously important for us, so oftentimes we look at meaningful milestones from a clinical experience. And like I said, the clinical results don't have to be immaculate. We understand the messiness of it. Regulatory risk is nice if we can take that off the table. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Reimbursement in our space is always super messy. Oftentimes you'll evaluate a technology and we'll say, we think this is a challenging health economic story. If you look back at some of the areas we've looked at, it totally changes over time and people invest in the evidence and all that. And then from a commercial standpoint, again, usually we bring these technologies in-house before there's any commercial traction.
I think for us, similar to the others here, it depends. If it's a technology that is going to integrate into our systems, let's say an AI algorithm or something to that effect, it's really going to be the performance of that algorithm and our assessment of the clinical need and how it can integrate into the workflow and the jobs that our customers are trying to do. If it's a full solution, then like the others, I think we're going to want to retire as much risk as possible. I'd say for us, having been in PMA devices or Class 3 devices, we are more in 510K, and so often it's really about regulatory clearance. There's not going to typically be large clinical studies that are underway. Reimbursement is often DRG, so it's more about the market and the problem that's being solved, how large that market is money being spent there, and will that help us to grow our position through our channel. Often not necessarily commercial or pretty small from a commercial standpoint, because that's really where we start to bring the value is with the channel and the commercial element.
This is just kind of a follow-on, but an observation that we've had recently in our executive search practice is there, and Finn touched on this, health economics, reimbursement, importance. We're seeing more and more requests from earlier stage companies to get a handle on that earlier, on how are we going to go to market in terms of where are we going to be reimbursed? Is this going to be a product that's going to be self-reimbursed, a self-pay, or is it going to be something at some point we can expect, a very nice and good return from a reimbursement perspective? So I'm curious if anybody has any other thoughts about, are you seeing this, companies worried about this at the earlier stage or not?
Happy to take that. I think it goes back to my point about helping us take risk out of the equation, right? So if you come to us and you say, well, this is the product, I haven't started selling it yet, or I just started and I only have $500,000, but it's going to be $100 million in 3 years. Let me tell you why. And that is grounded in facts. It's grounded in a good assessment of the health economics, the reimbursement landscape. They might not have reimbursement, but they can compare to, analogically to other situations. That makes it way easier for us to build that valuation and have comfort with that assessment versus not having any of that. Then it becomes a harder conversation. So I think that the startups are understanding that, and they're finding relevant to build those muscles and exercise that in anticipation of their fundraising, but also their discussions with strategics.
Any other comments on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, it's an integral part of the story. If you don't have that piece of information, how do you pitch, right, to your point? The other is, of course, when you do pitch, there is the clinical value that everybody sort of understands or you can rally behind it, but the economic value, the value proposition is the one that at the end of the day will make or break the company in the future. Because if you want to present to an investor or a strategic an alternative path, not just IPO or M&A, you need to have a viable business model that will provide an option or a sort of a plan B so that you can actually get to the valuations that you want and present it as an option for the company. So if you don't have that, in my opinion, you haven't done your homework and it's not a complete story.
I could not agree more with everything you just said. I would also add to it, we have a really good team of reimbursement professionals at Edwards. I don't know how they do their job because you have all the nuance to just standard reimbursement, and then we have all the dynamics that are happening with the shift in where care is actually happening. And that just adds a whole other layer to it as we shift more care outside the hospital and other sites. How does reimbursement impact that? You would think in our world where TAVR's the primary procedure, that, it was fascinating. It wasn't that long ago we were talking to a cardiologist recently that he was saying, maybe not here in the US, but I think it was over in Europe, they're already experimenting with, can you do procedures like TAVR on an outpatient basis in a center where you go home the same day? And it's like, wow, it's just kind of mind-blowing stuff, right? But you think about it and you go, it's hard enough to project where this is all going to go, but oftentimes, we try to do our best, and then we say, we know we're going to be wrong with reimbursement, but you got to have, like you said, you have to make the case, and you have to have the discipline to try to gaze in your crystal ball.
Yeah, I agree, because for us, sometimes I separate reimbursement from health economics because, in the implant or procedure, therapeutic delivery world, it's important to have reimbursement. For some of our product, which is more diagnosis, it's not about reimbursement, and then you come down to health economics, right? And then, one of my colleagues actually told me something the other day, which I think is very valuable to me. He said, if the new technology, well, by definition, you think that new technology is better, but it's just better by 15%. It's very hard for people to actually change their behavior today, right? It has to be either is so differentiated that people will just adopt it even without all those analysis, or if you can have your health economic story, try to spell it out, or you get reimbursement, it just helps the adoption dramatically. You need something there to help us think through it. And also for us, the more the companies have thought about it, the better, because for GE Healthcare, we're still kind of new, coming out of GE. A lot of things are being rebuilt. Although we're trying to do all the things that, the panelists that have been talking about, our team, the BD team, is relatively small. So we have a little bit capacity constraint on some front. So the more prepared the entrepreneurs are, the better for us to really kind of understand the story, thinking about some risk mitigation.
Yeah, if you look at our customers today, Hospitals right now around the globe are operating in the red, regardless of how their system is set up. And so anything that they are going to purchase has to provide some level of efficiency. It has to, shorten the amount of time that's required for a procedure, make the workflow that allows them to focus on patient care versus all the charting and coding that they have to do today. So there has to be a tangible economic value proposition in the sense of time or reimbursement or throughput that you can quantify. It can't just it can't just be kind of a back of napkin. You've got to be able to really quantify and prove that it is going to make that difference to the hospital, because every company is coming at them with a similar story. So how do you truly differentiate yourself and ensure that the technology that you're bringing forward is one that will be adopted and will absolutely impact their ability to move patients through the system?
I know there are a lot of early stage companies out in the audience, and then we have some that are at commercial stage, but a lot of very early stage. And this next question has to do with, I think you touched on this a little bit, Finn. When do companies, small companies, approach you, and what's the best way to approach you? Because I think oftentimes they look at these behemoths, the titans of the industry, and say, how do I talk to those people, and when should I approach them? So would you like to start with that, Amanda, or someone down here?
I can start. I think meetings like this are a perfect opportunity to come together. I would say, make sure that you understand the company that you're going to and where they are focused as a business and their targets. I think many of us make that pretty clear. And often there are, like I was just talking to somebody from Medtronic, they've got a portal that really talks about their areas of interest. So make sure you understand the company and their areas of business as you come forward with your technology or solution, and that it truly does fit with their strategy. But I think, forums like this are a great place to come together. I don't think it's too early to ever have a conversation. I think we're all trying to solve hard clinical problems. And while it might not be the right time to make a deal, just understanding what's out there, understanding how things are evolving over time is always important. I think the pitch competitions that we've seen lately with MedTech Innovator and MedTech Color, and the way that they're able to drive awareness around the startups that are out there and technologies allows us to see what's coming, what's on the horizon, some of the new innovations that we just don't have the ability to work on in-house. So I think just be strategic in who you're going after, understand their business and how you can create your value proposition. But I think forums like this are really a perfect place to come together.
That was a great answer. I will add a few couple things. We always travel in packs at these conferences, so we have a team that's here this week. A bunch of folks from Edwards' different businesses just come and approach us. We go to all the major cardiovascular conferences. We blanket all of them, so I'm sure you'll bump into us there. A lot of people reach out over LinkedIn. That's totally fine. I do check my LinkedIn messages. The only thing I never check actually is my voicemail at work. No one calls me on my phone. I've been here 3 years. I don't know if I've actually checked my voicemail at Edwards in 3 years. So don't use that. That doesn't work. But pretty much any other way to reach us and any time is good. Earlier the better, so.
I was just thinking, I'm not sure I have an office number. I'm sure I have one. I
think I do. I don't know.
I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I think LinkedIn is good. I think, like they said, right, the earlier the better. I think for me, I would say the more explicit you can be about how we can help you, right? What do you need? And I know there's a healthy degree of skepticism, not sharing too much, I get that. But if you need money, right, and you're going to fundraise, tell us. If you are thinking about selling, tell us. And if you do it the other way around, sometimes it's confusing. It doesn't help us position the opportunity internally the right way. So I think the more explicit you can be about what you need, about how you think we can help, the better. And I think the more voice of the customer you can bring into the discussions, the better, right? It's, as you can imagine, we get pitched on a number of technologies, and if there is, just back to the point, does it work? Great. Does it add value? Maybe. But hearing a customer, right, with a physician or an administrator explain that, speak of that commercial traction, that makes a huge difference. So I'd say as early as possible, as clear as possible, and with as much voice of the customer as possible.
Yeah. So let me, a lot of comments about this because I get asked all the time. I'll give you 10 numbers, okay? Write them down. It's 978-835-5477. That's my cell phone number. It's right here. But I mean, in all seriousness, anybody, I think the concern I get when I get that question is not how do we reach you. It's like, should I reach you? You're a strategic, you're going to perhaps steal my IP and all that. That should never be the case. If anybody on anywhere or sort of from a strategic has a business development in their title, they want to talk to you. We're not sitting behind our desks, trying to do other things. We want to be out there talking to the community and make the connections, and et cetera. So, like I said, anybody with a business development title should be able to take your call. They're not doing their job if they don't. The thing about calling somebody, though, is that you need to be focused. You cannot be calling Zimmer Biomet for a atrial fibrillation sort of device. You gotta know the space. We are in implants. We are, we are in orthopedics. If you want a stent, you have a stent product called Boston Scientific. If you want me to give you the names and the numbers, call me, I'll tell you. So know what you want and who is in your ecosystem, in the space. Call them, pick up the phone, email, LinkedIn. It shouldn't be a problem. And I know the community is very resourceful, so I don't want to talk down on them. It's just sometimes I get a call and it's like, I have a spine product. Well, we divested the spine business 2 years ago. Do a little bit of homework, not a lot.
Yeah, I agree. For us, it's not necessarily the earlier the better, because we still have a small team relatively, so we're kind of sometimes still constrained on the staffing front. But I agree. I think one thing for a lot of people to keep in mind, a lot of folks come out of big companies. They probably have friends who are there. They talk with R&D folks. But keep in mind, if you want to do more than just technology collaboration or like commercial collaboration, if you're looking for financing or acquisition, it's the strategy and BD team, most of the BD team that you need to talk to. If you don't know them, can just, doesn't hurt to ask your friends, who is the BD person that I, should talk to? Do you mind, just connecting with us? So that's one thing. At the end of the day, some of the field folks or like commercial folks or R&D folks, they're very good at bubbling up the opportunity to us, but not all of them. So feel free to ask that question. At the end of the day, it comes to us, right? That this is our, day job. That's what we're paid to do. Another thing I, started to appreciate ever since I moved to GE Healthcare is that it does take time to educate companies like us when you want to get a deal done. It takes a little bit of time. So when you were thinking about, for example, you want to do a financing, it's hard for us to say, hey, we're going to close a round like in 2 months, right? If you just started the process then, it takes more than 2 months for us to really to understand the company and really kind of find the sponsors internally, get everything aligned. So keep that in mind. When you have deals, you might, maybe build up a few months, at least half a year, the year before that, even better. Just educate the organization about it. Yeah, we will never just kind of say, hey, don't call us. We're welcome. We'll welcome all the opportunity to talk with the entrepreneurs. Yep. So
we have just a short period of time left, but Antonio, I think you sent me an email with an extra question, and that is maybe if you have any good stories about do's, don'ts, and things they should watch out for when they are approaching a strategic. Did you have something in mind when you asked that?
I should have, otherwise I should have sent that question. But I think we've said a lot of the do's and don'ts were part of this goal, of this discussion. I think a couple of additional pieces. One is, the earlier the better, we were just saying that, but I think it's important to have this story, to Christos' point, together, right? I find it, I was actually in New York last week meeting with private equity and bankers, and I was in a conversation about a certain company, a certain asset, and they have evolved a lot and how difficult it is to change the perception internally of a company, right? And so I was thinking, the earlier the better, but get the story right, because once we have your story, once we divulge it, once we work on it, if it changes significantly, it's going to be hard for us to change internally the perception of the company. I find that surprisingly hard. And so I think that's one piece. The other is more related to the do's and don'ts, is understand really who you're talking to. I mean, I think we are complex organizations, we're large organizations, we're not the most agile or nimble. So I think I would advise the entrepreneurs to understand who are they talking to, how is decision take place, make sure that they have an internal champion. Who's that internal champion? Try to understand how we make decisions, because I think on their side, as they're trying to make decisions and just trying to accelerate or delay some of their decisions, it will be helpful for them to get a perspective of how the decision is going to take place.
Great, and I notice we have just seconds left, so I won't put anybody else on the spot with that question, unless someone wants to say something quickly.
One thing I want to add is that even if when you reach out on LinkedIn or you didn't get a response, maybe you try it later again. Sometimes you just get buried. Like, for example, like a conference like this, if I get 100 requests, I probably don't get time to respond to everybody in a timely manner. So that's one thing. Don't feel discouraged if you don't hear a response. Maybe try another time. Another thing is that even if there's sometimes that we don't do a deal at that moment, maybe the timing is not right, just stay in touch. Really, if most of the time we will give feedback, and then when you hit that milestone, feel free to reach back.
Well, we're out of time, but I want to take a second just to thank the panelists for being here today. And I'm sure that some of them won't be able to get out of the room before you want to say hello to them. So thank you very much, audience. Thank you.